Hello, everybody. I am the Reginald L. Jones Fellow at the Indianapolis Recorder. And this week, I am talking about hip hop. And I have artist Gary G in the building. Boom, 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 boom. And Dr. Patrick Jones, boom, 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 right here in the building. We're going to talk about hip hop today. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast.
What's going on?
Welcome.
Hello, what's happening?
What's happening? Okay, so tell my readers and listeners who you are. We'll start with you, Gary, and then we'll go to Patrick.
So I am Gary G, born and raised in Indianapolis, mixed media visual artist, educator, hip hop head, lightweight historian.
I know that's right. I love it. Let's go.
Dr. Patrick Jones, currently the Senior Vice President of Leadership and Equity and Seats Expansion at the Mind Trust. Also the CEO of Knowledge Reigns Education Group. We create primarily African-American or foundational Black curriculum for the English classrooms. And also the Executive Director of Melanated Leaders. We support K-12 educators that identifies people of color in Indianapolis.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. So you see the expansion, you see what this conversation is going to be about. You can hear from their background, who we getting it. I mean, what's happening and what we're going to get into. So I'm going to start off with my first question today. What is the one hip hop song that impacted you the most? How did it affect you? How did it affect your being? And where were you when you first heard it?
I think for me, it's I got two, but the number one is Babylon by Outkast. Second album, ATLiens. I came into this world high as a bird from secondhand cocaine powder. I know it sounds absurd. I never tooted, but it's in my veins. That first verse was something for me. I never heard anybody be that introspective in a song. And for me, that was powerful. I wasn't even about to buy that album because for some reason I was really into Crucial Conflict at the time. The two albums came out at the same time. And my homeboy was like, I don't know what you're doing. You got to go get that cash. And that album pretty much, it really did change my life on what a rap album could be.
Right.
And so it was powerful. I liked a lot of rap before that, but that song right there was powerful for me.
It's interesting too because that song really outlaid the residue from the crack era.
It did.
Right. And so being able to verbally say that.
And then went into ideas of power and who's really in control, even though we might think we're in control because we might control a little bit of the space. And to understand when he's talking about we ran and raving about gats. But brother, they made them gas. They got some things that'll blow out our back from where they stay at.
Come on now.
It's something that it's a verse that really sticks with me.
Yeah. And makes you look at the cause and effect, right? Like it's really a dope verse. It's a dope album too. I'm an Outkast fanatic. All right, Gary G, what about you?
It's so many that have touched me like throughout life because it's like I feel like I've grown up like on it. So going back to the root, like in the beginning, it was probably gonna have to be Curtis Blow the Brakes.
Okay.
Little fella in my grandparents' house, come on the radio.
Yeah.
I just post and just listen to everything he said. I done heard Rapper's Delight, but the break, like Curtis just had that voice and it was just delivery and it was like he was telling the story and it just made you be like, man, what talking about? So it just put me in this realm, like I'm going there. So it probably had to be that or the Furious Five's The Message. It's like I literally was in New York. So as a visual artist, and even as a kid, I could visually see the New York grittiness.
Yeah.
It was like you feel that stuff, So I think for me, those are probably two of the songs that I know set the tone as a kid, you know what I'm saying?
I love the fact that you can remember exactly where you were in your grandmother's house, right? Like I grew up in church and we couldn't listen to a lot of hip hop. listen to music with no words, but it wasn't a lot of hip hop, right? And so being able to get that mixtape and sneak back into the back room and listen, it was something different.
There was that rare occurrence before it was banned, and it was just novelty records. It was just novelty records.
Yeah.
So it wasn't banned yet, and they, they just play them, and then, so you just heard them. But it was like, as far as the radio, I know it was Curtis Blow, the breaks.
Yeah.
Furious 5, I can't even remember exactly where I was. It's probably in the neighborhood or outside, but it had to be on the radio. You know what I'm saying? It was only a handful of songs. So it was getting that stuff. But like, I remember like Blowflies and Tom Joyner and them doing their stuff. So you remember it was really like, you didn't hear the serious records there yet. You was just hearing like a little entertaining stuff in the beginning. But I think by started making that hard impact where, we can realize it's like, oh no, it's for the devil. And so like you saying, they didn't want to play it on the radio and but teaching us a lot. So
yeah, they started early with not wanting to play it on the radio. Part of that too was because it wasn't really addressing the radio format. I think LL Cool J was the first one who broke through that and was like, yo, these songs is 3 minutes, right? Like, and I think L was the first to put like a real hook in the joint, right? Like, so, before it really wasn't like that. It was like a lot of just, standing there, rhyming over the DJ. And so the record was kind of reminiscent of what was happening in the street. Speaking of that, in regards to what's happening in the street and the role of storytelling, right? We talked a little bit, Dr. Jones, about how the role of the storytelling in that second album with Outkast, but how do you view the role of storytelling in hip hop period? And are there narratives, other narratives that really resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the reason people always ask me why I like Nas better than Jay. And it's not that Jay's a bad storyteller. I just think Nas is a better story. For me, Nas is the best storyteller in the game. And it's so important to the artistry of rap because I think some people have classified rap as like, in its deepest essence, it's like shit talking. And if you are to do that, if it's supposed to be a boastful effort, one of the best boasts you can have is the person that could tell the best story, because I can't really get on you. I can't really joan on you unless I can make people believe kind of what's happening in the space, unless I can put people in a cocoon of understanding how I'm clowning you, basically, right? And that's a storytelling skill is what that is, right? I'm building a world for you so that you can understand and make these moves. I think like it's an expert craftsmanship for me. Like for the technical side of the storytelling is absolutely amazing. And then when you get to like, so Nas is like, he has that narrative style, he uses personification, he uses very vivid and clear details. But then when you look at Big, who I also think is a very good storyteller, Big uses like, what do you call that? Where he uses people talking to each other. It starts with a D. I can't remember the name right
now.
Big uses dialogue in his storytelling. So if you listen to songs like Gimme the Loot, he's going back and forth with somebody. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're right. And he's talking back to each other. And that puts you in a different sense of the storytelling because there's no real narrator, right? You just following the dialogue. And I think that's powerful in and of itself. But I think like one of the things that hip hop does is people don't see it as an academic kind of endeavor. But when you look at Big telling those stories and those cadences that he's coming up with, it really, these guys were brilliant. I mean, we're not talking them. I mean, you can, I imagine the layman looks at these people like, oh, they just whatever, right? But you look at Pac, Big, Jay, Nas, I put Kendrick in there, JID, like these, Andre 3000, these guys are literally geniuses with what they've been able to do. The medium is just different. So they're not doing what James Baldwin was doing. They're not doing what Robert Frost was doing, right? Because the medium is different, but the same genius is present. Yeah. And so that's been the impact on me over time, just recognizing the genius in these gentlemen and ladies, Lauryn Hill.
Yeah. Yeah. I will venture off to say that I really appreciate the thought process of these literary devices that you're adding to the conversation, because it makes it definitely academic, right? And that thought process in regards to what is happening in the narration of these stories. But it's interesting about this thought process of who is better, right? When you, as opposed to having a plethora of people who are the best, right? And that's the part I think that's embedded in hip hop, because it is that, braggadocious, like I think Roxanne Shante was the first person on the scene to be like, ain't nobody hotter than me. Like, she kind of brought in that thought process of battle rapping, right? It was a female who kind of went to that thought process of battle rapping, but especially on record. And in that thought process, I have realized that all of them has done their role into making the genre better. And
correct. You can't have one without the other.
Exactly. So it puts you in that thought process of Malcolm and Martin. You know what I'm saying? If it wasn't a Nas, there wouldn't be a Jay-Z. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like that thought process that they had to have that boom, boom, boom in order to get it done. What about you, Gary G?
So for me, I'm gonna have to go like Nas, Jay-Z, prolific, but the greatest storytellers in hip hop to me is one should be without question. The other one slept on. Slick Rick, the great in hip hop. Voices, everybody who's in the game got it from Slick Rick. They just had this conversation over the weekend in New York. And it's like, it just makes sense. Like, Slick Rick's the epitome of story. And right behind him on the heels, like, love everybody, but it's Ice Cube. So when you compare him, like if we comparing like geniuses, it's like he's a literary genius. So it's like you got a little Iceberg Slim or some Robert Beck, but then you also got your Gordon Parks in there. You know what I'm saying? People. So he literally gives you the lens of where he's at. Like Ice-T to me, like one of the best stories that I ever heard in hip hop was 6
Come on.
And it really took you through LA traffic in the 80s and the game, like High Roller. So it's like Ice-T was one of them, and he basically patterned himself off of like Beck, and you know what I'm saying? So and Iceberg Slim. So that was one of his mock years, Iceberg Slim. So it's like we've always had these people that tell the stories. And even I say, if we go back to like a Blowfly or even Dolomite, Rudy Ray Moore, you know what I'm saying? Literally godfathers of rap to me. You know what I'm saying? Like without them, we wouldn't be where we're at. So it's all like a process of evolution and then just the layering. But I think sometimes too, it depends on where a person starts. So like before we started the camera and like moving up in life, you know what I'm saying? Like decades will produce different artists, and different people are born in different decades. So like you compare it to sports, like, oh, it's the Jordan and now they want to be LeBron debates, but they forgot Kobe, or you forgot about Dr. J. Say, you know what I'm saying? Ain't no Mike without Doc. So, we don't, a lot of these people we won't have. So I won't have a Rakim without Curtis Blow and Melly Mel. Curtis Blow and Melly Mel if it wasn't for Blowfly and Dolomite. So it's like we got to be able to trace our roots. And I think a lot of times we don't necessarily have that. But then just like the diaspora, but it's recorded, is our traditions are oral,
Yeah.
Rap is like there was no format at all. It was just us. It's just born out of chaos, confusion, or just us being us. So a lot of people couldn't and cannot comprehend that, I think, more or less. And then the stories we tell, like Chuck D. I mean, it's just so many people that tell us Light, MC Light, just like, I listened to something from her the other day in Light just to take you down Parable of Emotions. You know what I'm saying? Feeling Latifah. So, I mean, even when we go back, like we're saying, so Roxanne and UTFO, I mean, they started a whole genre of Roxanne. It could have just been a Roxanne genre when I was growing up. So many Roxannes, like Roxanne 23, like nobody knows. That like sparked like the beef and the braggadocious and the brawling and the back and forth era. But then you move into stuff like Queensbridge versus South Bronx. we got these errors, but it was still like, and then KRS-One's changed after Skylar Rock died. But,
Yeah.
you know, Freeman criminal minded, but he was trying to stop the violence, and that's what changed KRS. So it's like just a process of evolution.
Yeah.
You know,
I
and the
love
real life mixed with potential stories, and you know, so it keeps in and out. But
I love how you broke it down in regards to being able to visually see the picture, right? And literature terms, it's thought shots and snapshots, right? Like, and us being able to zoom in and zoom out of this whole picture. And I love how you introduced that thought process about these artists being those types of storytellers where they can give you a pictorial lens of what is happening around you. And I'm also appreciative. I love the fact that the cast of today's conversation is so expansive, right? Because everybody brings in their own, this is diverse in its own meaning, right? And so because I came into hip hop late, but I'm a fan of hip hop, maybe even an enthusiast, maybe even more than a fan. I don't know. But the thought process is, the women have always struck me, right? Like I come in, you know, thinking about how has the women impacted the genre itself. And I agree with you about that. Roxanne Shante, UTFO, and Roxanne going back and forth. And it's, you know, it's almost the invention of these social media handles, Roxanne 29, right? Roxanne 37, right? That came into play in regards to how we look at the social media and that thought process. But even before then, you know, like I love Lauryn Hill as a storyteller and her being able to connect that thought process of books, even the roots with Things Fall Apart, and how they was able to show the whole album and the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I love that thought process, and how and Lauryn Hill even visualize the miseducation happening in education, right? In the school system. The genius that was behind that process was something that should be unfurled. And all of this was happening with kids who was 13, 14, 15, and 16. You know what I'm saying? Like Roxanne Shante was 15 with, oh, this is how I'm going to do that, right? This is how I'm going to position myself. This is how I'm going to market myself. This is how I'm going to respond to this. Like, it is something to be said about the brilliance of these children, because that's, you know, who they were, right? Like these was kids impacting the world. This thought process with social commentary, political commentary, which kind of moves me to my next question, right? How do you feel hip hop has impacted the culture of society, both positively and negatively? Maybe I jumped up a little bit. Is there anything in regards to the evolution, since you got to that, right? Is there anything in regards to the evolution that you want to talk about with hip hop? And then we'll save the question after.
I mean, I appreciate how hip hop has evolved over time. Like I can still listen to hip hop in some ways, right? So I look at like how the Roots have evolved, how Nas has evolved, how, I mean, artists like Common's B album is probably one of my favorite albums. I listen to that album all the time. And that to me was like the evolution of like a rapper into like grown man love stage. Like it's okay to say that I genuinely love someone, not like a penny song, right? Like I genuinely have love for somebody, or this song is for my daughter. Those types of themes that I thought was, for me, it felt grown. It felt like if I'm a 35-year-old man listening to this, I still get it. I also am experiencing, like, you know, in a time where there are some artists that are coming out now that I just don't get. Like, I feel like my parents must have felt when they heard me listen to rap for the first time, or, you know, the first time they heard Uncle Luke or something like that. My parents are like, what the hell is this? And I'm like, so I'm listening to my son now. He listens to the artist called Yeet. He listens to a couple others too. And I just, honestly, I'm putting it on in the car. I'm like, okay, let me see if I can get into this. And I'm just like, I can't do it, but I'm gonna keep listening till I find the patterns, till I find out where everything connects. But I feel like I must have missed the link somewhere. Like maybe I was supposed to listen to some Drake song I didn't listen to that was gonna like tie it all together for me. Like I ain't got it. I can't find it. I can't find the wave.
Sequence.
What you say? Repeat that, Gary.
Watch the Marvel movie out of sequence.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I kind of think that the two questions kind of correlate and combine into each other. So like the appreciation for where it's evolved and then how I feel it's impacted culture and society, like positive and negatively, both kind of coincide to me.
Yeah.
But the first part makes me think of KRS. Rap is something you do. Hip hop is something you live.
Oof.
A lot of stuff that is produced and put out now is not hip hop.
It's not
rap, but it's a variation of rap. So you got real rap. So these kids are literally just talking about killing each other or just, it's just not. But for them, that's their reality. So it's kind of like, well, we got to be like, well, this is the reality, but it's also when words have power. You know what I'm saying? There's magic or there's strength in words. So rap or hip hop is all, but was only supposed to last 10 years. This was just a fad. I remember being told house and laughing and y'all doing this stuff and dressing like stuff ain't gonna be around in 10 years. Well, music and the hip hop culture are the biggest genre of music for commercial success. So it's evolved business, which is a blessing, but it's also a curse. So you see, like looking at the cats like Grandmaster Caz, Coke Rock, MC Shy Rock, Coke Brothers, Treacher Street, everybody in the beginning, DJ Hollywood, they don't get the money or the accolade that they should have. Even rappers we grew up on in the 80s, so then the youngsters are only listening to the money, but then the money's thrown to them by the corporations. You know what I'm saying? So you got young thugs wearing dresses, and carrying guns. So it's like the opposite of when we were being taught and mentored by rappers who were giving us, like, we had everything. So it was like going to the library. I can check out a book from Ice-T that's going to tell me about the gangster life. But I can also check out this book from Chuck D. So they're basically albums. But this Chuck D is going to tell me about the political and the social commentary and how to be a black man. And KRS-One is giving me knowledge of self. And Rakim's breaking down the mathematics. You know what I'm saying? And you still got the people like Kid and Play or Roxanne, not Roxanne, Salt and Pepper them. They're going to hit you with the party. So it's like you had everything.
Yeah.
So a diet is not just what you eat, it's what you watch, it's what you listen to. So we had all that. We had a Run DMC, we had the Fat Boys, we had the movies, Crush Groove and all that. It's like, so all of it coming up for us. And we're seeing this blossom and grow, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like you said, we were the youth, so we were the voice of this movement. So in a sense, it's like, that's what keeps driving rap or hip hop. But the problem is, like, some of the youth are misguided. So when you go back to like Lauryn Hill, groundbreaking album, because she was showing the miseducation. So the education of the system or the education, how we was being educated, or TV lies to us, you know what I mean? So it's like, it all kind of overlaps and goes hand to hand to me, like where the is. So it's $1 billion industry. Beautiful. But the bad part is we don't control this $1 billion industry. And we should.
And that's a whole nother thing too. I love the fact that you keep bringing in this cyclic, right? Like how we see these cycles and how these cycles are going and how they're moving in certain ways. That's a whole nother thing about ownership, right? Like producing, being curators, being not only curators, but being composers, I guess is the best word, being composers, and then not owning your composition, right? Like that's a whole nother thing within itself. And I think some of the new hip hop artists who I love, like La Russell, who is owning himself, bringing that thought process of this is mine. I'm not even going to let you into it. And in some sense, Toby and Wigwam.
And having the impact that a major artist would. So that's you can own all day, but the people sign because of the impact that I want to get to 200,000 people as opposed to 2,000. And La Russell has found a way to get to the masses while doing it on his own. And that's always the challenge. How do you get it to the masses at the scale of a record company.
Right.
And that's where it loses its soul, right? As soon as I ship it to the record company, it's at risk of losing authenticity. But it's right now one of the only ways, it's not the only way, but one of the easiest and only ways to get it to so many people. But is it worth it to risk the soul of whatever you're trying to create?
I think that should lead us right into the next question, even though I agree with that. And do you think hip hop still means self-expression then, right? Our social commentary, or has it become more commercialized?
As far as what is pushed commercially, it is commercialized.
Mm-hmm.
There are still plenty of purists out there, but you have to look for the pure sounds. I mean, like me, I live on XM, so I live on Rock the Bells radio. Like that's where I live. So I'll listen to Kaz and Shy Rock, and you get history and culture for them. Listen to Shantae and Cool V. So it's like you get different eras and you learning. You Short got a show on there. Bun B's got a show. You know, so you just listen to all these, salute the sample. So it's just a lot of different stuff like that for me. That and now, like, you know, we're being the 50th year of hip hop. And in the beginning, you know, for us, we thinking, it started in 79, because that's when Rappers Delight beginning. But then you start backtracking and you see the other stuff, or was little light leaks here and there. You know, all right, 73, but it's probably even before that. But 70 jumped at that 1520 Cedric Avenue, you know, with Perk and Miss Cindy. So it's like we've been, like, for us, it's been here our whole life. So we've seen it change. I said we just fall into the wrong hands, and you just feel like maybe as part of that evolution, it'll be a cycle as it comes back. You know, just like when we were growing up, you started seeing, even in hip hop, some of the 70s styles, or when some of the 80s come back, or the 2000s. So it's like, and then you get kids that are like, they are concerned about lyrical content or understanding. Like, I think it was the young boy or one of them, you know, he done had to say some stupid stuff because that's what they was getting paid to do. But I think he's realized, like, hey, my words have power, and you know what I mean? So it's like they are it's like some of them are starting to realize, like, money or seeing their friends die and stuff like that, that maybe the message they pushing right. So it's just like they got to grow up too. You know what I'm saying? And without guidance, it's like, then we got to see that's where they at. If everybody keeps saying, man, these kids are messed up and crazy, but ain't nobody talking to them or trying to put them on the right track, it's only going to get worse.
So. I think that's a good point that you bring up, because in my opinion, I felt like the baby boomers let hip hop raise Generation X, and Generation X, in some sense, let hip hop raise these millennials. Like, you know, it's a lot of absenteeism, and you know, baby boomers felt like it had to be done a certain way. Generation X was in the middle of creating this narrative and saying it's not going to be done that way, and I got to kick down the door, and this is how it's going to be done. And now the millennials is like, move out the way. Oh man, I got it from here, right? Like, move out the way. Let me show you how, this new thing. Let me show you how the internet is going to progress us forward. And in some sense, there's a lot of absenteeism surrounding that, right? A lot of people who have been on their own grind trying to get it themselves, and forgetting about a generation of people who is coming after them, listening to that thought process.
I 100% agree with that. I actually talked to you about this before, Tasha, when we were in schools, of like the psychological disposition of people who are raised on hip hop is more of a show and prove disposition, right? So it's like where, you know, even when I was growing up, you know, formal authority didn't quite mean as much as it meant to my parents, because you had to show and prove to me that I should listen to you, that you are a viable source. Right. And that's essentially the battle. And if we battle and you lose, I'm the teacher now. Right. You know what I mean? Even if I'm 14 in a physics classroom, if we battle and you lose, I'm the teacher of this classroom now. And you see that formal authority doesn't mean anything, because I can always combat you with the battle. And once we battle, If I come out on top, it's over for you. And then I think, like, do teachers understand they're coming into schools and operating from this formal authority mentality? I'm the teacher, so students should listen to me. Or I'm the doctor, so patients should listen to me. Or I'm the banker, so the people who come in are patrons of the bank, they should follow these rules. That's not how it works anymore. People choose to follow rules. They are saying, like, if I choose to battle this person right now, this bank runs how I say it's going to run. Now, there could be consequences with all that, but we see it with people like, I mean, they robbing stores, people cussing teachers out, body slamming principals. Like, this is, I mean, I'm not condoning any of those behaviors. What I'm talking about is people's relationship with formal authority has changed. And I think it's a direct correlation to hip hop. And I'm not saying that means hip hop is like at fault, hip hop is bad, because in that same vein, we view those in a negative sense. That could also be viewed in a positive sense when you look at how our government is going and what types of laws are being passed and what the Supreme Court is doing. Maybe we should start to question formal authority. And so, but I think hip hop has given us that freedom and that license to do so.
Kind of the catch with that too is, you know, like I said, so it started out as it's supposed to be a fad, it's not supposed to last. And when you got a bunch of young Black youth start making a lot of money, you know, hundreds of thousands and then millions of dollars, and most people come from nothing, you know what I'm saying? So there is nothing to teach you, or you learn the process, and a lot of times,
that's a good point.
But we're not taught in schools like financial management. We're not taught from it. We're just taught how to follow and work. If you go back in the beginning, hip hop was like a voice and an outlet for kids, or even like Zulu Nation and all that, or even doing the block parties, it was to keep kids out of gangs and off the street, curb the violence. You know what I'm saying? So some of the gangbangers become b-boys and breakers. You got taggers, so it's the street art and graffiti. You got some people who's going to be DJing. Of course, the Bronx was burning, so they had a lot going on. At the same time, they was pulling art and music programs out of schools in the 80s. So it's like it's causing this conflict and confusion. Creativity saves lives. You know what I'm saying? Creativity is like a message. And so, in a sense, we were learning and coming off the backs of the 60s and the 70s with the radicalism or the pro-black movements, but, you know, they killed the Panthers. So as we coming up, they kept killing our leaders. They killed Kenny, they killed X. So then we starting to get the history from, so like Chuck D's and KRS-Ones and Poor Righteous Teachers and
Rascals, the nature of the threat.
Yeah.
You just go on and on and on. But then, so when they're talking about these books, then we're going to want to start going to read the books that they're telling us to talk about. We start doing the research about the Bible. We start doing the research about Islam.
Yeah.
And also, it's going to cause confusion too. Like, it's a Christian household. What this boy trying to listen to this Malcolm X for? He the one that killed. You know what I'm saying? But it's like rap is getting me on that lane. So it was becoming too powerful. We were educating ourselves. We weren't that they saying we were. We were changing stuff. Kids were enrolling in college, Black during the late 80s and the early 90s with hip hop. And then, like, I love gangster rap, you know what I'm saying? Just because I was caught up in them lives at the same time, just as much as the positivity stuff. But gangster rap took over to the point where some of it in the beginning, it was reality. Then some became just nonsense, you know what I'm saying? Which is the precursor for what these kids will have is the drill rap now. Like, some people can't separate this is a story versus this is reality, or they will blame hip hop, right? But they never got on Brian De Palma. They never got on Coppola. You know what I'm saying? They don't get on them for being violent and extra in the movies. You know, just like I heard the other day, like Hitler killed what, 2 million white people? That he's the worst in the world. King Leopold killed 20,000 Black people. They don't 20 million. It's about that. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like history goes to the victors. Like, we were educating ourselves. We were learning through the music we was listening to. It was because like the music was in the 60s for the 80s. Like, we grew up in Reaganomics. I remember Reaganomics. You didn't really know how hard it was, but you knew it was a difference during economic eras. You know what I'm saying? It was hard on the economy. We had the contraband going on. You know what I'm saying? It was just a twisted time. So, but we're learning about this stuff through the music. So you got the party raps that you can laugh and play with, but then you also were getting knowledge. It was like, this is our commentary. This was making us pay attention to what was going on socially. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
From one point. And it was like, then also hip hop started bringing people together. Like it's black, but it started out with black and brown. And you know, like New York or Cali, like you could be anybody. You in that hood, you in that hood.
In there.
Yeah.
White, everybody's just creating and they together. So it's a lot of unity. So that's also going against what should be a melting pot. They try to keep us separated. Well, that was bringing together. You know what I'm saying? So you got hip hop concerts, black kids, white kids hanging out, Mexican kids.
Everybody.
Nobody fighting at first.
Yeah. That's you keep dropping these jewels. That's a good thought process of the collaboration, the connectivity, the unity, the camaraderie, you know, and exploring this thought process of who we are and where we should be. Queen Latifah did that really well. Coming in on the scene was like, yo, I'm going to tell you what's happening in South Africa. We need to figure out what's going on over there. We need to figure out what's happening here. This is how we're going to do things as a collective, and let's push it forward, right? Like, man, this conversation should be longer. I wish I had some more time. I wish I had more time so we can really just dive deep into it. But I am going to ask you two more questions before I go, and then I'm going to ask you to tell me what both of you have coming up next, right? Like, so one of the questions is, how do you see the relationship between the different elements now as opposed to then? And because I'm a poet, I know I started off as an MC, you know, like rhyming. I was in a rap group, a church rap group first, and then a rap group, and then, you know, poetry. But I think the whole time my rhymes has been poetry or poems. But this thought process of the last poets and how much they have been sampled and used, and them as a genre, poetry as a genre. What are the elements to you? Have they evolved? Are they continuing to evolve? Right? You know, we know DJ and MCing, you know, graffiti and breakdance, but do you add something else? Do you add poetry? Do you add fashion? What else do you add in these elementals?
I mean, I'm adding thought. I'm adding there's a thought pattern. It's also very free, so it's not like it's too constrained. But I think there is an intellectual aspect to hip hop, even spiritual in some ways. There are a lot of spiritual traditions connected to it. Killer Mike's just last album, one of the last songs he got a woman speaking in Yoruba, talking about Ifa on there, right? Oh, Michael is absolutely incredible.
It's brilliant.
He got a woman talking, speaking in Yoruba at the end of the thing, praying and praying over his ancestors for him and stuff like that. So when you look at like the spiritual and intellectual piece of hip hop, it's pretty much always been there. I think it's solidified by KRS-One and people like Lupe Fiasco, what he's doing at MIT and Harvard and all the places he's been. So it's been interesting to see it move and grow in that aspect. And it's all connected. I mean, I think, you know, with the music and fashion, the one thing I love about hip hop is, like, in some ways it can be defined, but mostly it can't be, because hip hop is based off of all other art forms that came. It's a borrowing of things, right? Yeah. Even the fashion, we're going to take that and we're going to make it this. We're going to take this sound, we're going to make it that. Yes. And that's what makes it beautiful, because it means it can be anything, even though, like, its most common aspect is we taken from all types of places and making something new. And I think that's so beautiful. That's the most beautiful piece about it. I think it's one of the art forms that admits that I took this from you and I made it better.
Yeah. Roland, so I'll quote the OG Grandmaster Caz. Hip hop didn't invent anything. We reinvented everything. So fashion from the beginning, it's had its own fashion, had its own swagger, its own character, you know, just move. It was a youthful energy. Like, we grew with it. So it's like what rock and roll was and funk and disco became, hip hop took all that and ran wild with it. You know what I'm saying? So it does got any genre, and every genre elaborated or spin-offs, rock to country to funk to folk to church music, classical now, you know, the symphonies do like renditions of, I saw Pac and Biggie, you had Kendrick Lamar, you got the Chronic, so it's like they just Drake, so it's like they're mixing rap with classical orchestra music, you know what I'm saying, and symphonies.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, I mean, just classes. So Lupe, you got Sha Rock was a professor, you got KRS-One, you got Swiss Beats, you got Bun B, Dr. Eric Dyson. has a class on Tupac. You know what I mean? So it's just like, we are history, we are culture. This has changed the context of not just America, not just the Bronx, the South Bronx, or Queens, or Brooklyn and Manhattan. I mean, here in Indiana, you know what I'm saying? Global. It's like hip hop has changed the world. You got people in different languages and dialects. I mean, Railroad even talked about the brother Kid Creole from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, but he got locked. He had a show, Hip Hop International. So it was like, it was just traveling around the world and you playing all raps in different languages. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the movement energy is just universal.
It's definitely that. It's definitely that.
It can't be stopped unless it's killed. And I think some of the industry people, they make money on it, but it's like they pimping us or trying to kill it. You know, it's like the black exploitation movies. It's like a lot of them I love, but then a lot of them like, man, come on, man, they just getting over on us. And that rap is at one point, but it's like what's real and what's fake. So it's like getting back to the pure forms of what it's supposed to be for is like, if we can find a way to get back to that, which I think having the 50 years and talking about that, like it'd give a chance for even some of the younger people, because I saw younger people when I was in New York this past weekend, or just, that are starting to get the culture. And the ones that start to get the culture and understanding is educated, and you know where you come from, and you know what it was founded and started for, then it can get back to that. So I look at it like it's a religion too. It's a way of life. You know what I'm saying? It's a form of music, or I put on these clothes and I'm hip hop today. No, you hip hop every day. Or wait, that's how I look at it.
I love that thought process too of it's a culture and how we look at it. I think to me, I think hip hop is I think it's high art, and I think a lot of people miss that component, right? It is definitely high art, and I think it has saved some places like classical music. It has saved classical music and symphony going too. It has saved art itself. You know, the thought process of how art is supposed to look in a museum. Hip hop has saved that. It has saved what exhibits and exhibitions look like. Hip hop has done that. We see that, right? Saved. You know what I'm saying?
Why I'm into other art forms. I would have never listened to a blues song. I would have never gotten into classical music. I would have never gotten into Charles Mingus. I would have never gotten into some of these artists without hip hop.
Exactly. I agree with that.
Plain and simple. When you hear that sample, you're like, oh, let me go check out this dude. Let me go check out this lady's album. And then you get to, I'm like, woo. I was listening to Brenda Russell the other day, her album with the same name. And I'm like, Brenda Russell was around when I was growing up, but I'm listening to her music like she's a genius songwriter. But you know, the song that links me to it is still a Big Pun. Want to be a player. I can't remember the name of the song, but you know what I'm saying? That song links me to
exactly.
And now I get to experience the genius of her songwriting because of hip hop.
Yeah. And that's the part that too, that bothers me about not getting credit, right? Like you have these hip hop artists who have done these amazing things, connected people, and then they don't get the credit for it. But then when you have one of our counterparts do the same thing, like this conductor right now who is mixing classical music with Drake or classical music with Biggie, then he becomes a genius and is lauded and paid in that sense. So we really have to keep up. I think I'm not going to share his name, but yeah, in that thought process, I think we have to be on top of that, right? Like I'm not going to give him more play than necessary, so I'm not going to share his name. But in that thought process, we have to be on top of what it is that we own and understand our value to society and our value to history, and hip hop should be learned from that standpoint. So I'm glad that it's in these places of progressive education, like in, on the Northeast. This is my last question, and I'm going to wrap it up. Patrick, I know you have to get off of here. So what do you think the future of hip hop is? And while you're answering that, tell us what we can, what's coming up for you and how the audience can find you.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know what the future of hip hop is, but I'm willing to go through it and experience it. So that's how I look at it. I don't know. I can't figure it out, but I'm happy to be on the journey, Because if I'm on the journey, that means I'm still alive. That means blood's still beating, and I get to experience it all. So I'm looking forward to that. And it connects me and it binds me with my son and my daughter's experience, looking through their playlists, trying to figure out what they into and trying to connect with them. So I love that part of it. And what's up for me? So I'm huge into math education. I launched Exponential Prime. Let me show y'all here. So Exponential Prime is a math book about a young lady who travels through math worlds.
A young lady
who travels through math worlds. And we have a math competition for K-3. If you're a school principal, a school teacher that has a math classroom in your care, we'd love for you to purchase a competition kit. You can do so at exponentiaprime.com. The competition kits are for 25 students, allows you to get them involved in competition math. The longest time the United States has been participating in the International Math Olympiad. There's been no African-American person on the U.S. Math Olympiad team. There's been no Latinx person on the U.S. Math Olympiad team. There's only 2 schools that have a math counts competition club at middle school. They're both private schools here in Indianapolis. And so we want to make sure that we're giving our students an opportunity. If we're going to change this world, we got to do it from multiple pillars. And technology, STEM education, mathematics education is one of those pillars that we have to control for ourselves. We can't do that unless we invest in the math genius of our young people. So buy our competition kit, and we'll have a citywide competition in February. Date to be announced later.
I love that. I love the fact too that you got the main character is Rod Digger in hip hop, right? Like she's that female MC who could have went at MIT, but it was like, oh, this rap is calling me bad. So I love the fact that the sister is on the thing.
There she go.
There it is, right? Nice.
That's the queen that she saved right there. So
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Gary G, what's next with you?
What's next for me is tonight I got a show library curated by my homie Omar Rashan. It's Universal Drip down at the Central Library, 5 to 7:45 p.m. And I got a piece called Universal Drip.
Okay.
And then after that, Labor Day weekend, I'm in Butter. So I got some new 3D pieces of drop. Butter, the Fine Art Fair. It's my third year for Butter and my 3rd year in it. So be ready for that. And then working on some pieces behind the scene. I got a solo show coming to the Harrison Center in November. Nice. It's titled Last Basement. So, just
say
working.
That for me one more time.
Last Time in the Basement.
Last Time in the Basement. Yeah, I love it. What's the future of hip hop?
The future of hip hop, for me, is Hip Hop Anthology Volume 5. And I'm trying to bring it back to the roots with a whole new visual narrative. So that's next June. But I hope that the state of hip hop overall is getting back to the roots and the culture, the education and the learning process. Even self, like I'm still learning at 50 years of hip docket. It's like I literally went to the Mecca this weekend. It was at 1527 Avenue in Yankee Stadium. So it's just the whole vibe and whole air was hot that I had to leave on the first day and kick off of Harlem Week. But it was like, man, it's in the air and it's pushing coast to coast and world to world. So even though we're saying that this is the 50th anniversary of hip hop, it's like you said, it started, but it's still going until next year. It's actually still the 50 until August the next year. It'll be 51. And I'm hoping they could look at it like, well, how some people was mad or felt like they was left out. Well, maybe it might be 50 years of West Coast hip hop coming, or 50 years of Southern hip hop. You know what I'm saying? We just keep the trends going. It's like we got the mothership is the culture at hand, but then we started branching out and it expanded, moved, and elevated. So I want to get back to the elevation side of it instead of the state side, so that would probably be like more ownership of putting stuff back in our hands. And, it's hard. It's $1 billion business now. So it's like, some people don't want to let everybody in, and some of the ones with money, they just making more money, but really think where they started at or, how it's going. So,
Well, I am so grateful that both of you guys were in on a podcast this afternoon. I'm doing a podcast with the ladies in education. So I got a couple of guests on who's teaching hip hop And so I really appreciate you guys coming on, talking to me about it. And I would love an opportunity for us to continue the conversation in some way, even on a bigger platform, because like you said, this is just the beginning, and it's at 50. And so it can extend, right? And it can go many more ways. And so maybe we should just come around and have more conversations in Indianapolis about, hip hop, the state of hip hop, and where it's going, or what we see or what we want from it, right? Or what we can contribute. And so I'm grateful. Thank both of you for being on. I appreciate you, Gary G. I can't wait to come to the exhibit tonight. And thank you for sharing. And Dr. Jones, thank you for being a part of it. I appreciate what you guys have had to bring, and thank you for your legacy. And I'm looking forward to sharing your information about your math competition and being present for that, because it's necessary. So thank both of y'all. Peace and blessings. Hello, everybody. I'm back. Like I said, I was coming back. I am the Reginald L. Jones Fellow for the Indianapolis Recorder. And right now, I have with us, ladies first, give it up for Manon Voice.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Introduce yourself to my readers, my viewers, my listeners. Tell us who you are.
Sure. So Manon Voice, raised right here in the city, Indianapolis, Indiana, and grew up on the Northeast side. Went to Tech High School. Always got to shout that out.
Okay,
went to IU, but my childhood, I grew up during the golden era of hip hop.
Okay, go ahead, state your claim.
Yeah. So I'm always proud to say that. I'm really proud to say that, because it was the era of innovation and competition, of experimentation within hip hop. Hip hop was really being solidified now as a part of mainstream culture. So I grew up during that time really being exposed to hip hop artists, across every region of the US. And it was just something that I lived, I breathed, and I had a lot of brothers. I have 6 brothers. And so that really influenced what I was listening to. So hip hop was being played in our house 24/7. So I got my education, right at home. And so I always loved hip hop. I had a profound love for it, even while in grade school. Most of my friends were listening to like R&B, but I was coming through and I knew like the rap lyrics too, you know what I mean? Like the top hip hop songs that were on the radio. And so my passion for it was just really imprinted very, very early. And then I was dating somebody in college who was a hip hop artist, who was really a brilliant lyricist. And I was going to the studio with him. And so he would be in the studio working on these songs. And I would just experiment with just like writing to the songs, because I was bored and I needed something to do while he was like in the booth and working with the producer. And so one day I ended up writing a whole verse to a song that he was working on. He came out of the booth and I said, hey, like, listen to this. And I just, I didn't right. So dropped a quick 16 and he was like, oh my gosh, you wrote that? And I was like, yeah. And so he was like, this is amazing. And so he kept encouraging me to write. And so I started like recording. I started working with other artists. I eventually dropped an EP, started to perform in the city. So I'm also a poet and spoken word artist, an educator. But before I started performing poetry, which a lot of people know me for, I was actually doing hip hop. When I first emerged on the indie scene, I was not doing poetry. I was doing hip hop.
Full-fledged rapper.
Yeah.
Same. I was too.
Yeah. And there is, like a very beautiful marriage between poetry and hip hop, because, you know, I'm sure just like you, Tasha, the most profound hip hop lyricists are essentially poets, right?
I agree.
So yeah,
some of my favorite hip hop artists are poets and storytellers.
Yes, absolutely.
Before we even break down even more so, you know, what you do now, what you're currently doing, let's deep dive into this, starting off right off the gate, you know, like as a poet, as a rapper, tell me what was the first hip hop song that literally just did it for you, right? Like which song just really impacted you enough to be like, yo, this is, oh, I can feel this. Like this resonates with me. What was the first hip hop song? Who was the artist? And do you remember where you were when you heard that first song that just knocked you off your feet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so while I can't remember the first hip hop song, I remember what artist impacted me the most. And that was Tupac.
Now, come on.
Which may sound cliche to say, but that was real for me. Tupac, especially his double disc album, All Eyes on Me. I was so enthralled by that album that I was literally sitting by the stereo before Google, before you could, you know, there was like Lyrics Genius. I was literally listening and then writing down his lyrics.
People don't know about that yet, the rewind and playback.
Right. The rewind and the playback, right. Like with the cassette tape.
That's right.
So, you know, songs like I Ain't Mad at You. You know, songs like How Do You Want It? You know, all of these songs really, really imprinted my psyche at that time, along with Queen Latifah. And so like UNITY, right? Seeing this strong Black Afrocentric sister represent, who was positive, who was a storyteller, who had presence and command, that was really impactful for me to see during like my early years.
Yeah. Sis did a lot of breakthrough too. Like I think she was one of the first to win a Grammy, maybe. I think she was. Maybe even UNITY, you know, was the song that broke through for us and reversed that thought process. But you're right. Before Latifah, there were artists who were doing things that were more, you know, conscious driven, but she broke out in the thought process to say, let's interact with what's happening across these waters. Let's bring in what's happening in Africa right here to the United States so you can know exactly what's going on. So I really appreciate her movement in regards to that and how she saw us as a people, right? Initially out of the gate, we are kings and queens, and she wanted to just really highlight that point and to introduce what was happening across the water to what's happening here and make that correlation. She did a really good job of that in the introduction of hip hop. I really appreciate it. And I appreciated her for doing that. Still appreciate her for doing that.
Like at a time when there are a lot of women identifying artists, right, with the visibility that they deserved. There has certainly always been women since the inception of hip hop.
Come on now.
But because of marginalization of women's voices, they were, kind of behind the scenes and not given the same kind of visibility and recognition as their male counterparts within the culture. So what she was doing was really phenomenal because she was this woman speaking out about these issues. When apartheid was happening, she was also, with her songs talking about domestic violence, right? On women before the Me Too movement. You know what I mean? Before the Me Too movement, she was literally talking about these social issues which were taboo at the time. And so I also have a lot of respect for her as an artist and even as an entrepreneur. I mean, most people don't know, but she was running a label. She had signed 17 acts at one time, like in the late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
So she was at the helm of a record label, which was also very rare for a woman to do at that time.
I think it was a lot of people too at that time because they were actually starting this genre, not knowing all of the hats they played or all the roles they played, probably was not even realizing that they were doing all of these jobs to push what it is that they love. You know what I'm saying? Like UNITY, the song itself, that was the rap song that won a Grammy in 95. But not only was she telling you about this domestic violence issue, but she was still saying that we need to unify in a whole nother sense, right? Like we are one and we can be one from a presence that is not what we're accustomed to. So let's make sure that we push that. And I love that thought process in regards to her. But I think a lot of them in that time didn't realize, this is something that we had to do. And they were CEOs and presidents of their likeness and their being, which was completely, unheard of, especially being that they was like 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, right? Like having wherewithal to do that at 19, at 18, this right there is something that we should just, like scream from the mountaintop, because it is amazing to actually see that and actually go back and say, oh, we knew all this from the very beginning innately, right? Some of the things that we were doing, they probably couldn't even name, A&R direction, like her being able to say, oh, you got real good talent. Come on, but that's an A&R director, not even putting the names exactly with the role, but because this is a part of what it is that we know how to get stuff done. And because we know how to get things done, let's put together the team and make it happen.
Yes. And that's what I love about hip hop, is that it's literally about the ingenuity, the genius, the creative genius of a people who were literally creating something from almost nothing, right? But through their own resourcefulness and through their own resilience, they were shaping a culture of a people.
Yeah.
And they did that through artistic expression. And that to me is the foundation of hip hop and why we celebrate it, because of narratives just like what you uplifted there, that they were doing things that they didn't really have a blueprint for, but they were exploring and they were figuring it out and they made it happen. So,
It's the beautiful thing to me about this role that women play. You know what I'm saying? You really highlighted Queen Latifah, but with Latifah, if it wasn't for female DJs, hip hop would have never been on the radio. If it wasn't for label owners, if it wasn't for Sylvia Brown, like hip hop would have never had a record. You know what I'm saying? So it's this role of what women are doing to progress a genre that people are really, sometimes it's not really talked about, but at the same time, we know, right? Like it's that look, we know, right?
We know. Yeah.
But you're right in regards to that thought process that hip hop itself is a genre that has been the social and sometimes political commentary of a culture of people, and it has progressed us to a whole nother space and time. And what really is incredible to me is that these 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds have made an impact and on a world, right? Like hip hop is so international, and people, what happened earlier in our conversation is that people were saying that Gary G had made mention that people was only giving it a 10-year run. Like, this is probably only going to last for about 10 years. And now we're in this 50th year, and we're realizing in this 50th year how well it has impacted, infiltrated communities, infiltrated really these almost esoteric places, right? When you see hip hop in in classical music, when you see hip hop in art museums, right?
On Broadway,
yeah.
It has really permeated every facet
yeah.
of culture at this point.
Yeah.
Both nationally and internationally.
Yeah, you're right. Internationally too, where people it crosses language boundaries. It crosses cultures. It crosses, like, it's really just no denying us as a people and us as a culture. And so let's talk a little bit about that in regards to the political and social commentary. Do you feel like what is the positive and the negative being permeated in those spaces, right? Is there a negative at all, if it is one?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I think that there is this ongoing tension between commodity and culture when it comes to hip hop. And you can see those sort of two strands start to emerge, as hip hop was moving out of the Bronx, where it originated, and then was moving to Manhattan, where it would now start to swirl with different kinds of cultures and different kinds of people. The Roxy was a place that everybody was coming to in Manhattan. And I mean, all kinds of ethnicities and, races and backgrounds. And they were taking in hip hop culture, but hip hop culture then started to meld, right? And be in conversation also with these different types of cultures. So it was no longer just isolated in the Bronx. Now all kinds of people were interested in it. And so while hip hop was becoming more known, it was becoming more mainstream. Some of the first international tours were happening in the early 80s with like Africa Bambaataa and Rocksteady Crew. They were, packaging hip hop as a culture, taking it overseas to Europe. And so globally, people were being introduced to the culture and the art forms within it for the first time. And at the same time, there were, people that wanted to get their hands on it to monetize it, right? And so now you had these two strands happening, and it's like, okay, how do we preserve this culture, which was born out of struggle, which was the story of a people? How do we preserve it while also letting it evolve and letting it become more known and more accessible and more available to people? And so that struggle still exists today. And, and I think that's why you have conversations, we are at 50 years, like, about what is real hip hop, and you have some people who are what you call hip hop purists, like they believe in a certain kind of hip hop that is gritty and that has social and political value. And then there are some people who are just like, you know what? I just want to be able to go to the club and dance to it and listen to
bullshit. Okay,
right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think, we continue to navigate that tension, but we're all a part of the conversation. And I think that it's important that we all be a part of the conversation and included in the shaping of a culture that is essentially Black and brown people. And that is what I think I'm passionate about, is that how do we keep it in the hands of the people who shaped it and who made it and who birthed it?
Yeah, that you have a lot to unpack right there. I really want to go back to this thought process of what is hip hop then? Like, are you a hip hop purist? What is hip hop to you? Is there a difference between hip hop and rapping?
Yeah. Yeah. So hip hop is a cultural phenomenon. It is, there is what we essentially articulate as a hip hop genre of music, which is also very true. But hip hop as a music form exists within the broader cultural phenomenon, right? So this cultural phenomenon involves artistic elements of hip hop that emerged through innovation and through experimentation. So those cultural elements, Africa Bambaataa was really the first person to outline and articulate 5 cultural elements of hip hop. KRS-One outlines 9. I see both as being relevant. But I'll just state what the 5 are. So it is DJing. It started with the DJ, right? You said it all started. Hip hop is founded, with
the DJ making a party move.
With the DJ, absolutely. So it started with the DJ. And then there is the rapper, which was known as the MC.
That's right.
And so
I think there's a difference between the rapper and the MC, right?
Yep.
So I'm the type of person to be like, it's people who rap and it's the people that's MC, right? And so absolutely. I'm on the MC side. So I'm a good DJ and MC. What's next?
There you go. Yep. And then there is the B-boy, B-girls, break dancer, right? Which was in response to the break beat.
That's right. Come on now.
And so yeah. And then there is graffiti. So the visual aspect of hip hop. And then the 5th element, so there's 4 artistic elements, and then like the 5th element would be knowledge, would be the transference of knowledge, knowledge of people, self-knowledge, using hip hop as a tool of education. And so those are the 5 main elements. But you have, like other people like KRS One who have also added in like fashion, beatboxing, language, entrepreneurship, and all of those are relevant as well.
I do believe that thought process of linguistics needs to be added into that, right? Like, I think hip hop by itself, and maybe even that could be taught if it hasn't been taught already, but the language of it and how it is a whole nother language, right?
It is.
Yeah. If you're not always brushed up on it, you can lose your fluency.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, because it's always changing.
It's evolving. Yeah, right.
Like, what's cool to say this year, the young people next year, it will no longer be relevant. They'll be saying something else. But you are so right, and you said that so brilliantly. Hip hop has shaped, has altered our, lexicon, like our common parlance. Rappers literally have invented words that now we just use,
that in our modern day lexicon and in the dictionary. And it's even more to that, right? You can see it when it's misused, right? And I think the other day I was watching a rapper, Cameron, and he was talking about how ESPN has people who are not of the culture using cultural language, right? Like that's cap, and it looks a mess. Right, like and he was like how it looks and how it doesn't even feel authentic in the thought process, and that maybe sometimes people have to take a step back and realize who they are and what is their why. You know what I'm saying? Like that thought process. I think ESPN is letting go of so many people, but they're trying not to lose this cultural hip hop aspect, which drives sport almost, right? And
Yep.
so even with that language, it's imperative that people stay in the know. But it looks corny when people who are not of that language, who are not of that
outside the culture,
not only outside the culture, but don't even know the language and express it in the same sense, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, but that's an interesting thought process in regards to the language itself and how language has always evolved like that, right? We've had a language that is archaic now, and within hip hop, that is still the same thing, right? There is language within the genre that is archaic, and there's new language to be unfurled, and that itself, in regards of the history of language, we have always had that. We've had like words that have been passe and words that we are still, grappling with, and words that are going to be unfurled in the future. My children will have new words that I am not aware of. And so I love that thought process of hip hop and changing language. And
absolutely.
Yeah, it's that part for me. I think that, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I just was going to add this little anecdote. I was in a hip hop and Shakespeare play last year through the Indianapolis Shakespeare Company, and it was called Ricky 3. And so it was like a play on Richard III. And so while I was studying and working with this play and with the language of Shakespeare, I was seeing the parallels of how Shakespeare actually invented words, like so many words that we just take for granted. Like he literally made them up for his plays, and that literally and that these words actually help to shape new meanings. And so words are shaping new meanings. And so that is literally the same thing that rappers and MCs are doing. They are literally inventing new words, but they're also giving us new meanings, which is really powerful. And you and I both share in this passion for how words have power. And so when it comes to that, just like the power of language to give us new context for things, new understandings, new revelations of what is happening right before us, that really points to the power of hip hop as a culture.
Yeah, that was the other thing that I wanted to talk about in the earlier conversation. The man made mention that hip hop is a lived culture, right? And rapping is the music you like. I thought that was different, right? Like, you live hip hop, you breathe it, you can tell, right? Like it's almost like an acknowledgement of people when you see them, like I see you, right? Like it's that in that thought process. This is interesting. I love that. The relationship between the elements that you name, how do you see that relationship evolving? Right? Is it how is it going to evolve? Is it already at its peak, or is there still more to grow? Right? Like, especially from that intellectual thought process, right? I think we're just now, I don't want to answer the question myself, but we are at the helm of what hip hop and education looks like. Right. So explain the elements in the form of the expansion, especially surrounding intellect and knowledge.
Yeah. And so I'll kind of first answer that question as it pertains to the relationship of the elements. And so the block party, which is where hip hop was being cultivated, was the lab for all of these elements in hip hop to exist together. So just like I said, you had the DJ who through learning the crowd.
Oof.
The idea of what DJ Kool Herc did with the break beat was literally, he was working as a scientist, as an experiment.
Come on now.
And so he was, yeah, I mean, he was watching the crowd. He was watching and studying how people responded to certain parts of the songs. And he noticed that on these records, you know, that were primarily, you know, soul and, you know, funk and even disco, that there were certain parts where the music would become really elemental. And that is the parts where people would go wild. And so what he did was take that data, right? And then he was like, okay, I'm going to try this at a party. And that's what he did.
Using that then. Come on.
Absolutely. He isolated that part of the song. And then through his technique called the merry-go-round, he transitioned between different breaks, and people were like, whoa, oh my goodness.
What is
it? And of course, the beat, right? Because, you know, this is African culture. We are always responding to the beat, the drum, right? Like that's in alignment with our heartbeat. So, you know, so that was the basic foundation of hip hop musically, is this putting together the break beats. And so then you had the MC, who was basically, the DJ was at the forefront. And then like the MC was basically trying to hype up the party and would kind of, you know, help the DJ. You know, and then rhymes started to emerge from that. That became more sophisticated over time. And then, you know, the dancers were responding to the break beats. And then the graffiti artists were responding visually. But at one point, all of these elements were literally existing together very, very beautifully.
Yeah.
And
that's how it started all together as one. Right.
That's how it started. And then over time, you sort of saw where, you know, as hip hop evolved, it's like, you know, it's like each artistic element then took on a whole life and kind of subculture of its own. And so, you know, and so now you had breakdancing competitions and a whole breakdancing world where there were crews who would battle one another. And it was, you know, still in relationship to hip hop. It's just that you just started to see these elements, you know, started to kind of, inhabit a subculture of their own and language of their own.
Is it a subculture or a concentration, right? Like if you keep it academic, all of the hip hop itself and its basic four elements was college itself, right? But then you have people who are focusing in on a concentration. And so those persons who were into dance, that became their concentration, right?
Yeah. Like, and that's a good way to look at it. I think so. Interestingly, we, you know, even when we think of hip hop today, there's a reason why we first think about the music.
Yeah.
And it's kind of because we don't, in the traditional way, like we used to see all of the elements together. Yeah. You know, we really don't see that as much anymore in the ways that like in the same format that it used to be. So so by the mid to late 80s, rap actually started to be and come to the forefront. When it used to be the DJ, now rap started to be the forefront of hip hop culture as a whole.
Right.
And so, you know, and there are a lot of different reasons for that. You know, when it comes to rap music being a commodity, it's just kind of easier to consume, you know, like than perhaps breakdancing or graffiti. And so, and so there are, social and also political reasons why that has happened.
That's an interesting concept in regards to it becoming a commodity and maybe easier to consume, because I think the thought process, I don't necessarily know that I wholeheartedly stand with that, but I respect the thought process solely because that commodity or that concentration and the language that I would prefer of graffiti infiltrated high art in a way that really shook up the art world and has created I can't remember the name of this designer. I can't remember her name, but she has a line that says it's ghetto until it's proven profitable, right? And the way graffiti altered the art world, it really made these white artists, like household names, some white artists, household names because of And so in the thought process, I don't know if I think it's more of a concentration, right? But I love your thought process in regards to that. And that's the beauty of hip hop, being able to dialogue about these different processes and how it looks and why it is. And, but man, it's brilliant. And that's part of the brilliance of it, right? And again, these city kids in the city, right? Mastering scientific hypotheses and without even it's almost like they're architects with no training, right? Like it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You can go ahead and finish your thought.
Oh no, it's it's all relevant. Just like as you were saying that, like I was thinking, so if I ask you, or you might know, but the average person can probably name me 5 to 10 rappers, but can't name me perhaps maybe 5 to 10 well-known graffiti artists. And so it's not that they are less relevant, it's just how it's interesting how that just rap music has kind of been almost like elevated. Right?
Yep.
With the exception, this is something that I love sharing, but Basquiat, right, who was graffiti art, is now the highest selling artist in American history. And I love telling people, a hip hop artist, right? That came from hip hop, right? And now is literally the highest selling artist in American history. But just like you were saying, if you look at the history of graffiti, there were anti-graffiti campaigns in New York where they were literally
arresting
people. They had a whole section of NYPD just allocated for finding graffiti artists and penalizing them.
Right. And the same way that they have the whole, they have a whole section for hip hop, they have a whole section of police officers that's on the hip hop beat that listens to hip hop lyrics and in that thought process. But I agree with you in that thought that this art where people have deemed ghetto until proven profitable, when it works on when it works, it works. But I appreciate Basquiat in that thought process. I think one of his paintings went at Christie's for like $55 million. Like, it's crazy in the thought process. And I love it. I love every bit of it.
Right. Yes. Posthumously, which is, like that he is, and I think like another one went for maybe like 100 million or something like, something that Basquiat, I'm sure, would have never imagined. Because he was living at a time when there was, people were maybe starting to open the door to these graffiti artists and invite them into the fine art galleries. But there was still a lot of there was still a lot of anti-Black sentiment that was going on.
Yeah.
And graffiti artists were being stereotyped as criminals and as vandals and as outlaws.
Yeah.
And so, I love what you said about, it's deemed as being ghetto until it's profitable.
Yeah. I have to find the person whose line that is, but that is, and make sure that she gets her credit, because the sister really was like, it is, and it's ghetto until it's proven profitable. And it has worked like that all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like almost with even your lips or your body build, right? And your lips was ghetto until, the people put their lips in a pop bottle and to try to get this same fullness. Then everybody in the market is now trying to do the same thing that we've been born with, right? And so in that thought process, I don't want to get off the topic because that can be a whole nother conversation within itself.
Yeah. But it begs us to ask the question, like, who gets to decide? You see what I'm saying? Who gets to decide the narrative, right? And that's why hip hop has always been subversive. It has always been kind of counter cultural. It has always pushed back against these kind of created norms that were just a veneer and a pretense.
A front.
So, yes. And so I'm a hip hop purist in that sense, where I'm like, no, hip hop has always been subversive. It has always been revolutionary. Oof. So how do we preserve that revolutionary aspect of it and not lose that? That's what I'm passionate about. Like, how do we hold on to that? Because within it is a people's history, is a people's voice, is a people's message.
Yeah. That's when hip hop has to be studied, right?
Yes.
Because when it's learned from that standpoint, then you can see the true value and how much it has changed the world, right? Not just that I'm going to change the world, but actually literally impacted the world. And so it becomes that, right? It becomes a class taken. It becomes higher level thinking. It becomes, embedded into the academic, of which what you're doing now. So tell us a little bit about what it is that you're doing.
Yes. So I work at Butler University, and I am in the School of Music.
First of all, how is that? They treat you okay?
The first hip hop instructor.
You all right, sis? No.
You're like, wink, wink. Oh, but you know what? I am enjoying it. And there are challenges and there are rewards, but me being here is revolutionary. And I keep that in mind every single time I walk in here. I'm like, me being here is revolutionary to teach, to be teaching hip hop, music, history, and culture at an institution like Butler is certainly, a revolution within itself.
I love the thought process, because in the sense of why the university was started, I think the founder, you in mind, right? The founder had you in mind, but the progression of everything to now that makes this revolutionary, because the founder had you in mind. The founder had you in mind, and you in mind doing what it is that you're doing. But it is that journey to this space that has made you an anomaly, has made you revolutionary, and that is something to be said. So how did that come about? Did that come about just because Butler woke up and was like, yo, we need to hire a hip hopper? Did that come about with the youth saying, yo, if y'all don't make some changes, this is, these are our demands. I need you to meet them.
Yeah, and it was actually a little bit of both, sis. So I have to express gratitude to someone who was really important in this journey, and that's Dr. John Perkins, who is a professor here in the School of Music.
Wow.
And so he had heard of me through someone else, had heard of my work. And, and this was several years back. And he invited me to a Black History concert that Butler was having. This may have been like 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a collaboration with one of the choirs here at Butler. So we were doing this interesting fusion of like the Negro spiritual and then hip hop, and talking about its like relationship. So I did that a couple of years back, I think, which kind of really opened the door of possibility.
Yeah.
And then Dr. John Perkins invited me into his classroom, and he said, "Hey, I would love to get you into my classroom as a guest lecturer." And so I was like, okay. And from the beginning, he expressed the value. He's like, I would love to see hip hop at Butler University, though I really, I like that Dr. Perkins, I just kind of thought, okay, yeah, like that sounds nice. But he invited me as a guest lecturer. I came in and lectured on women in hip hop.
Come on.
And afterwards, he pulled me aside and said, "Manon, you've got to teach here." And again, I just thought it was like a nice compliment, And but he was really serious. He was really earnest. And so much so that he went to the chair for the School of Music.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, well, like, okay." And so I did a presentation on what hip hop could look like in
Academia.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
And kind of pulled some resources together, also references for other universities, a handful across the country that are also, offering hip hop courses.
It's a handful, but they are prestigious.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Harvards and MITs. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Yep. Because Lupe Fiasco is teaching at MIT now, which I'm like, wow, so we are really starting to move, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, to kind of make a long story short, ended up getting a meeting with the dean of the entire Jordan College of Arts, who was really gracious and who did convey to me, "Manon, our students are asking, like we're living in the 21st century, and they are asking for,
Yeah.
yes. And so
And a
diverse array of course offerings. Yes. Just like, and not just the Western canon, right? Because even when it comes to music education, like a lot of these music students and majors are going on to teach, and they're teaching even in, in urban settings. But even if you were not, right? Hip hop is still mainstream culture now.
Yeah.
So to not have any kind of, to be like a music expert and music teacher and not have any kind of contact with hip hop, right? Because most people don't know, but I want to say as of 2019, it alongside our R&B literally became the highest selling genre in the country.
Surpassing country 5 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, surpassing country 5 years ago. Yeah,
absolutely.
But we understand the value that Black people have with money making, though, and generating money, right? Like we understand that value. It is that's not the argument. The argument is whether or not what they do is a learned, something pertinent enough to be learned, right? Because our existence itself, we know how to do that, right? Like in that thought process. I appreciate you giving credit where credit is due in regards to highlighting Dr. Perkins. And I think you playing it small. I hope you, I don't want you to play it small, right? Because it don't play it small, sis. Your gift made room for you. You know what I'm saying? Like it's gift made room for you, and not just any woman would do. And so I don't want you to play it small, because not just any woman would do. Your gift made room for you, sis. And I appreciate the thought process that you're saying, that you tell us that being humble in the thought process, but I don't.
Thank you, sis. Thank you.
I'm not saying that I don't believe in that type of humility, right? But I am saying that I don't believe in that type of humility because the God that I serve reminds us that we masterpieces.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
So as a masterpiece, right? Like the gift making room for you, it afforded you this opportunity. And so I appreciate the thought process of, but don't play it small, sis.
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. And for that affirmation. And I was kind of taking us through the logistical journey of how I landed here. But like a whole confluence of things have happened that have prepared me for this role. And I do think I am standing up in it. I feel that I'm the person for the job,
Absolutely.
And so, even before I arrived at Butler, I was, teaching, I was making my own curriculum, teaching hip hop to, youth summer camps, and, using it as a way for young people to engage in their neighborhoods, to engage in what was going on in their city, showing them that hip hop had value of creative and social agency.
Right.
So, I was doing that for years,
You have to sell it to me, because I'm there. You know what I'm saying? Like like I said before, you don't have to play it small with me. It's not by happenstance. I know exactly the route. And for some people, if it looks like it just happened overnight, that's them, right? But this is a lifetime. You have the lifetime of doing this work. And that's what I mean when I say that thought process of playing it small for or being humble, in a sense of appeasing sometimes our male counterparts in the thought process, right? But you at home, sis. This is home, and with that process of being home, the founder had you in mind. The founder had you in mind, and you're the perfect person for the job. And I have some thoughts about I have my own personal thoughts about how universities study Black culture, or more so Black contribution, right? Like, so if you think about rock, if you think about jazz, if you think about folk, if you think about blues, if you think about all genres of music, almost every genre of music was Black presented first, right? Like from rock and roll to hip hop, it's Black music.
American music is
Black music.
Black, period.
It is Black music, right? And so with that thought process of people having to force a university to say, don't forget about this one, right? The hip hop is the thing. But I do think that over time, and I'm going to give grace to Butler University in some sense for some things, in regards to making a conscious effort to say, we need it, and we have,
and it's time.
Exactly, it's time now. And so in that thought process, and that's what I hope, that's what I want to see, that I want to see how Butler evolves to be exactly what it it was initiated to be. And like that's one of my plights. Like I really want Butler itself to be who the founder designed it to be.
But it started out. Absolutely.
Yeah. I really love that concept of that. And I'm going to do a deep dive next week on Butler itself, but that's a whole different conversation. I do appreciate your journey to it, and I appreciate you outlining the journey to it, because there may be some of my viewers who are trying to get into that university thought process, and you just outlined the way. So I appreciate you helping them out, because it's necessary. And I really appreciate that. I only have one more question, because I know time is of the essence, but I really appreciate you having the time to sit down with my audience and my viewers and my readers. But can you tell me, what do you think the future of hip hop is? And how do you envision yourself in it, and how would it evolve?
Yeah, that's such a good question.
It's me too, so you can take your time.
Yeah. You know what? Hip hop, though, all kinds of people across generations and ethnicities and cultures love it now, but it started off as youth culture, right? It started off as something belonging to the youth, black and brown youth. And so it continues to be, you know, like while we have veterans in the hip hop music genre who, to me, keep it steady, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I just listening to Nas came out with an album, I think, just a couple of weeks ago. He's legendary, and so it's like he kind of keeps it steady. And he's this sort of bridge between past and present. But the young hip hop artists are the ones who push the evolution and who push the progress of it. And so it will continue to grow, it will continue to evolve and change based on their worldview, based on what is happening outside their doors, based on what is of value for them. And so I have faith that, you know, it will be around, right? For another 50 years, you know, for another 75 years.
I think it has embedded itself into the music tapestry, and that it, like rock and roll, will live on forever.
Yeah. And, you know, and there will be all these, you know, like, it's like at first, you know, it was just rap. And now there's all these little, you know, offshoots. There's, you know, there's East Coast rap. There's
there's trap. There's this.
There's trap. There's mumble rap. There's that. There's, you know, so it will just keep, you know, it's like, I just imagine it like as this tree, but all of these offshoots will just keep happening and will just keep growing and developing. And so I think my role, I just feel like I want to be someone who is a cultural repository. You know, I want to be someone who encourages the young people to keep taking it forward, but also reminds, right, them of where we come from, and not to forget that. I mean, I was like commenting on, you know, I was commenting on this platform that was celebrating the 50 years of hip hop, and they posted all of these rappers of the last, you know, maybe 10 and 15 years. And I said, okay, this is good. I said, but, you know, I said, where's the pioneers now? Like, we can't leave them out of the conversation.
Right.
They gave us the foundation.
Right.
So I want to be a culture bearer, as well as a performer and a participant, you know?
Yeah.
So just like you said, like hip hop is something that we live. So I am excited where I am now of seeing it in academia, because I think, I mean, we could have another conversation about hip hop in academia as a framework of education. You see what I'm saying? Not just the hip hop course.
What you're saying.
And I know that you do because you're also an educator. So even using hip hop literally as a framework, as pedagogy for how we think and of the classroom experience. And so I am, trying to further that in that fifth element of education. I'm really committed to it.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on an assignment, and so I'm really committed to using hip hop as a transformative vehicle.
I think that's so important. I'm not cutting you off, but I definitely think that's so important in the thought process, right? The way hip hop has integrated itself in this, from a pedagogical standpoint, looking at it from a social, political, intellectual, cultural, and economic standpoint, right? Like that, those frameworks, those levers are what that. And really it pushes, that's brilliant. And even pushes it from a whole nother space of being metacognitive thinking, right? Taking our thought process and that structuring it that way and changing K through 12 education and even post-secondary education. It's just like, oh, okay, that's something within itself. That's brilliant. And I think that should be really unfurled. Really, like I would love to see more work in regards to that, because that's exactly where it is. And those are the levers, those are the pillars that hip hop used to solidify itself as a world genre. And so looking at education from that framework, really, if you are already, most culturally relevant or global educators are like that anyway, from teaching through those lenses of those pillars. And so interesting and looking at it from an even deeper standpoint to make it a pedagogy.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yes. I love that. I love that.
You hit it on the head. Yep, that's exactly it.
Yeah. Now my mind is thinking about a whole nother thing, right? I'm ready for that.
I know. I was like, come on, sis. You can join me.
Yeah, I love that.
I know you got your own thing going on, but you would, yeah.
I love that framework. But if you need some help, just call me anytime. I'm with that thought process because I know that framework, when we looking at it from that angle, and we could talk about more from that, but that's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I gave like a presentation on, to NAFME, which is a music organization recently. And it was using hip hop as a framework to teach cultural relevancy, cultural competency. I mean, and so what we can mine from this beautiful culture that we have created is just rich and extensive.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so that's what I am excited to see, like, how can we continue?
Don't threaten me with a good time. Don't threaten me.
Okay. Yes.
With unfurling brilliance for our students so they can grapple with, and even some adults so they can learn how to interact on a global mind stage, mind frame. Yeah. I love that thought process. I am going to make one correction to earlier comment. I said the sister, her name, I knew it was the sister. Her name is Narkeisha. Yeah, it is Narisha Willis, and she sparked this whole fashion industry by coming out with this fashion work that says "Ghetto until proven fashionable." Right. And really talked about fights against cultural appropriation. And but I use it as ghetto until proven financial, improve that you can monetize it, right? It's ghetto until you can monetize it. Right. So I love that thought process. I can't wait to see what else is coming down the pike for you. I'm excited. This work is amazing. And
I really appreciate you. That means so much to me coming from you. you know, just a person with your brilliance and, you know, artistic caliber. No, I mean, you already know how I feel about you. So, I mean, but that really does mean so much to me, because not everybody sees the vision. You know what I mean? I mean, like some people are like, oh, you know, okay, like that's a cool thing that you, I mean, even some of our, you know, own people, and they're just like, oh, wow, like hip hop, like that's, you know, like that's interesting. But I'm like, no, but hey, it's like there's a whole vision to this.
Yeah. Not only that, it's going to soon lead the pack.
Yes.
Nothing has infiltrated the world like hip hop has, right? And that's why when I broke down those pillars from, you have to have that economic standpoint on there, because the way what hip hop has done economically throughout the world makes people stand back.
Yes. Right?